Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most trusted voice in true crime. So in our recap of the phone data review, we are at June 30, 2 years ago today, in the Chris Watts case. This is a single entry and it reads, Watts searched the internet for information on tickets to Bandimere Speedway. Now in the past I've compared the sort of activities on weekends and just the general way that Shanann would sort of spend her time to what Watts did when he was with Kissinger, the restaurants they went to, the trip to the sand dunes and so on. And I've just sort of put it out there as sort of an open question. What would you rather be doing? Would you rather be at a Thrive spiel, a sort of a Thrive get together, and sort of, excitedly sort of talk about patches and powders and how Thrive has made your life so awesome? Would you like to do that sort of day in, day out? You can never get enough of it, or would you want to go to, say, Bandimere Speedway? Or go camping in the sand dunes, or go and have sex with somebody? Which one would you rather do? And the point that I was really trying to make with that, and I can understand how some people sort of feel like it's unfair or unkind even, to sort of say, well, poor Shanann, she was just trying to make a living. What I'm trying to sort of illustrate is Chris Watts was in a marriage. He wasn't happily married. He wasn't feeling fulfilled. He wasn't feeling listened to. And this is not an excuse of Chris Watts. It's not a defense of Chris Watts. It's simply sort of saying this was human nature at work. He was not happy, and so he chose somebody else. He chose experiences with somebody else. And, him and Shanann were sort of scheduled to have a genuine experience with one another the weekend after she died. They were going to go to Aspen together. It's just unfortunate they didn't have that experience before. And you can say, well, they did. They went to San Diego together. Well, that's exactly what I'm saying. A Thrive convention isn't an authentic experience. It's not spending time together. It's not a genuine, it's not a couple's retreat, put it that way. You are putting on a show in order to sell stuff. That's really all it is. It's not something that I think certain people would get terribly excited about. And that's really the point that I'm trying to make, is that Kissinger offered Watts this diversion from, it had been quite a long time, a couple of years of Thrive. Inside his house, in the car, all the time, everywhere. And, another thing that one could even say is, when Shanann went to see her family in North Carolina, it wasn't, strictly speaking, just that. It wasn't just family time. It was also Thrive. She also went there to build, I guess, her business in North Carolina. And the odd thing is, when Shanann went there, she didn't do her videos went down to zero in August, and the month prior to that, they were very low as well. So one sort of got to wonder, what actually happened in North Carolina. Was it a successful business venture? And we know kind of what did happen. We know that in the 5 weeks that Shanann was there, Nutgate happened sort of into the sort of first or second week, and Nutgate kind of dominated, I think, Shanann's thoughts and the family dynamic for the next 3 weeks. So that was really something that preoccupied Shanann. And then, of course, in the week that Watts went there, there was this sort of atmosphere where nothing much happened either. So although they may have saved money in terms of school fees, they didn't really make money in other ways. They may have saved money, but they didn't really earn money, if that makes sense. So there are two other points that I really want to make in this video. It's not going to be a very long video, but the 2 points are, firstly, it's quite amazing how quickly bear in mind that they returned from their trip together in San Diego on the 26th of June, and then on the 27th, Shanann's gone. Shanann leaves with the children, and Chris Watts is on his own, and he now has a window of 5 weeks in which to do whatever he wants to do, and he doesn't waste any time. Within 3 days, June 30th, he's searched the internet for something that he wants to do with Kissinger. Now, I don't want to argue with the people who think that they knew each other for a lot longer, or that their relationship went back a lot longer. I don't want to argue with that. I do want to just counter that by saying there's no evidence of that. So what this is on June 30th is evidence of what's making a search, which they found on his phone, which is related to Kissinger. It's related to him doing something with Kissinger. Now, he may have done other things with Kissinger in earlier in June, and maybe even in May and in other months. There's just no evidence of it. So an alternative narrative to the one that they'd been together all along, or whatever it is the one where something happened after those emails on June 12th. Something developed very quickly. Something had already developed before Watts went to San Diego. When he got back, he knew exactly what he wanted to do. He was really already kind of pining for his mistress. And when Shanann left town, he wasted no time in getting the show on the road. And it started with this trip to Bandimere Speedway. And it's quite a sort of visceral experience. I mean, you can almost smell the gasoline, see the smoke, see the fire, in the bellies of these engines, hear the roar. It's just a visceral, loud, powerful scenario that they went to sort of spectate. And compare that to people sort of chattering on Facebook Live, and I'm so excited about these patches that I'm wearing, whatever. They kind of don't compare. It's almost like comparing a football game to someone playing ping pong. The one is just on a completely different scale. Do you get what I'm saying? I'm just saying the one is visceral. It's a visceral experience. The other is kind of small and kind of petty and just totally different, right? And this was something that he and Kissinger had in common, that they were both into engines, and they were both into diets, and not diets, but eating right and looking after their bodies and all that kind of thing. And then very shortly after this, just 4 days later, Kissinger came to his house. Now, something that I meant to mention earlier, but it sort of slipped my mind in the video, but I guess I can mention it now, is it's never really mentioned whose idea it was to go to Chris Watts' house. It's sort of just mentioned, well, I'm going to go there and help him out with his diet or something, whatever it is. But I've got a feeling that it may have been Kissinger who said, I want to see your place. I want to see your home. I want to, maybe it was, I'm suggesting this, I don't know for sure. I'm just saying, wouldn't she have been curious? Because at this stage, I'm sure he'd been to her home quite a few times. And even after the 4th, he would be at her home every night for quite a few nights. So couldn't it have been Kissinger who maybe felt curious about, I want to see your home. I want to see kind of who you are through your home. I want to see maybe also even your your children's rooms or whatever it is, out of curiosity. And I would kind of imagine that Watts would be reluctant to do that. That it would sort of be Watts's reservation kicking in and saying, "Well, I don't really want to take you home." He'd have to worry about the sensors kicking off and maybe alerting Shanann, but also, what would the neighbours think or say? So he'd have to sort of sneak her in, and also. I believe him when he says he didn't really feel comfortable being at home anymore. Didn't feel like it was his home. And he if he wanted out of the marriage, he probably wanted out of that home as well. And ironically, I think Kessinger saw it the other way around. I think Kessinger thought, I want this. I want what you want. I want a nice home. I want, rooms for children. I want to be part of a family home. I want what you have. And so there's quite an interesting contrast with that. The point there is that I think it was Kessinger who said, I'd like to see your home, and Watts then took her to his home. So that's the one thing to mention. The other thing that I want to emphasize, and it's difficult to emphasize this in a fresh way because people have spoken about it. It's difficult to be forceful about this because people have thought about it before. But, in some previous work that I was doing, I was just thinking about the situation that the Watts family were in dire financial straits. That they were really struggling financially. They were about to lose their home. I mean, what can be worse? What can be worse than like losing you don't choose to lose your home, you are losing it. You can't hold on to it. And what can be worse than that? And within that situation, guess who makes the absolute worst decision? I mean, it's the most idiotic decision I think that's possible under those circumstances. And it's where Watts decides, let's have another child. And I think the thinking, the analysis around this sort of came about thinking about the Laurie Vallow case and just thinking about magical thinking and fairy tales and having beliefs that have got absolutely nothing to do with reality. And I was trying to see how there was intertextual elements in that aspect between the Laurie Vallow case, in seeing your children as zombies and yourself as some kind of god figure, and how that kind of belief, silly, crazy, irrational belief, is present in the Watts case. And for me, the best example of that was Chris Watts kind of going, it's almost like shaking his head and just shaking everything that he knows out of his head and saying, let's have a child. Let's have a third child, and that's going to fix everything. And, under certain circumstances, yes, or maybe. But there were so many reasons not to have a third child. For starters, their second child was quite sickly. Cece seemed more sickly than Bella. And besides that, there was also their finances. And, when did Chris Watts realize that they were housebroke all the time? When did that realization kick in? Are you telling me it kicked in when only by the time that he started his affair with Kessinger? I don't think so, because he was already using Anadarko gift cards with Kessinger, which suggests that he already had a system dealing with having no money. He already knew how much it was costing to put the girls in school. But you seem to have a situation where Shanann was in this sort of magical thinking thing of Thrive. That was sort of her area. And Chris Watts was in his own little magical thinking universe. Don't tell me how or why exactly, but it was just, I don't know, it was the Chris Watts version of reality. And I think Chris Watts just seemed to have very little experience of the real world, not only of women or children or money, but he just seemed to be almost like a fish out of water. He's a mechanic, and Yeri was living in the suburbs, almost thinking like, well, with a credit card or whatever, I can have whatever I want. Money isn't real. Money is just like a phantom thing, and why let it hold you back? Well, if you can only live like that to a point, and then it catches up with you, and was about to catch up with him. And I kind of get the feeling that Kissinger provided him with a reality check in a couple of ways. First, in the way that she may have said to him, how can you afford all this stuff? Just common sense. I know what job you're doing. How can you afford all this stuff? And then he may have said, well, Shanann controls the finances and she brings in a lot of money. And Kissinger probably, in the beginning, may have not thought about it much, but then later on thought, wow, that doesn't really make much sense. And then the penny may have started dropping for Watts, that, wow, this doesn't actually make much sense. But even if the penny was dropping in that sense, him deciding to commit murder just shows to what extent Watts is like this strange figure occupying some kind of parallel universe where there's no accountability. And it's that exact same thing where he wants to commit a crime because he doesn't want to go through the pain of a divorce, right? It's the exact same thing where you say, well, I'm just going to have another child. Who cares about finances? It's like there's just no link. There's no accountability. There's no consequence. It's just I'll do something and I'll kind of avoid the consequences of it. And that's the exact same thinking that went into the committing of this crime. I'm going to kill my one child. I'm going to kill my other child. I'm going to kill my wife. And most of all of this killing is really just to prevent a pregnancy. And and I expect to get away with it. I'm going to take a polygraph test and I expect to pass it. I'm going to try to con a CBI agent and an FBI agent. And then when they come speak to me again, I'm going to try and do that again. I mean, when do you realize that you're a bullshitter, that everything about you is bullshit? When do you realize that there is the real world? And I think we've got to be careful looking at Chris Watts and saying, you idiot, or looking at Kissinger and saying, how could you go out with this married man? I think you've got to not judge them as much as look at what they did and what happened to them. Look at what they did and where they made the error where they said, well, I don't know if karma is going to affect me. I believe in karma, but maybe there's a way I can avoid karma if I say certain words, or if I try and wangle things a certain way. Maybe I can. Everybody else is affected by karma, but maybe I can avoid it. And instead of us looking at them and saying, wow, what idiotic people, or, I think you're a horrible monster, whatever. I think another way of looking at it is, in what ways are you doing that? In what ways are you spending like there's no tomorrow, or forgetting about accountability in a host of ways? Things like your health. If you eat this, that's going to happen. If you don't exercise, that's going to happen. If you don't maintain contact with that person, you're going to lose that relationship. If you keep doing X, Y, or Z, that and that and that is bound to happen. And, we live in a world where you can turn on a light switch. If you've used something up, you can throw it away. And you don't see the cow being milked when you pour milk into your coffee. You don't see the trash being transported to the garbage dump when you throw something into the trash. So there's the sense of fragmentation of our reality, where things that you don't see, you think don't exist, but they do exist. They just exist behind your back. And we need to reconnect ourselves to this world and to each other in a real way, to say, I'm accountable. I'm accountable to me, and I'm accountable to you. I'm also accountable to the, you could sort of call it Gaia, the spirit of this world. I'm accountable to life on earth. How much I waste things, how much energy I use, how much water I pollute, how much stuff I consume, how many little creatures I kill needlessly. I mean, a kind of a good question to ask is, this far into your life, think about it like on one side of think of it as 2 yards, and on the 1 yard are all the little creatures that you've eaten, literally consumed by eating them with your mouth and digesting them with your stomach. And that's in a way what human beings are, is walking stomachs. Some of them are bloated and really big. And then you ask yourself, in your life up to now, how big is the pile of skeletons that you've gone through? So there might be a pile of chicken skeletons, of chicken bones, quite a big mound, and then another pile for beef or cows or whatever, and another mound for lamb chops or whatever, another pile for fish bones, and each one is quite a big mound of dead critters that you've consumed. Then there's another pile of flies that you've swatted or whatever, mosquitoes that you've sprayed, cockroaches, whatever, ants, and so on. Maybe also a pile of birds that you've ridden into while you're driving your car. This applies to everybody. It applies to me as well, right? And so that's the pile of death that you've left behind in your wake as you've lived your life on this planet. And then you say, on the other side, what have you grown or sown or contributed to this world? What have you not consumed? What have you added? What have you planted? What has developed? What has achieved life because of you? And it might be one other person or another person. Maybe you planted a garden. Maybe you planted a farm. Maybe you've planted. Maybe you've got a pot plant in your bathroom. All I'm saying is we can be the monsters of this world where we go through and we leave a wake of death in our, behind us. And when you want to plant some things and add to the life on this planet, rather than just being a walking subtraction in terms of things that are not you. I'm just saying it's something to think about. And that's why I say when you think of Chris Watts, try not to think of it as, I'm better than him, I hate him, he's a terrible person. Think of it as, this guy did something, he wanted to have a child, and then he kind of changed his mind, and he put no consequences to that change of mind, and he also put no consequences to having the child. And that is what sort of got him into a world of pain. And it's all of these people in the story, Shanann, Kissinger, and Watts, they seem to be blissfully unaware of their own karma. Shanann didn't seem to know how much she was earning with Thrive. I know that's a controversial issue still for a lot of people. No, she was earning a fortune. That's why they were going to get rid of their house. But she definitely wasn't aware that Chris Watts was having an affair, and maybe she would have been aware if there was just more of a sense of being anchored. And I'm saying that's something we all need. We all need to be aware of what's going on around us, and you're aware when you have a sense of consequence and attachment to when you got your feet on the ground, right? It's good to be present in the world. It's good to have a presence in the world. It's good to know what your place is in the world, so you can expand your footprint, or find a better place for yourself in the world where where you feel more comfortable or where others accept you. In Kessinger's case, it was the same thing. What about the consequences of having an affair with a married man? In her case, it blew up spectacularly. She had no idea in her wildest dreams that this not entirely innocent affair would have such a devastating impact on not only her life, but on a lot of lives. And that is almost something that she's going to have to live with for the rest of her life. This is sort of the defining, she probably doesn't want it to be, but it's probably going to be a defining moment in her life. And the challenge for Kessinger is now to find something else to define herself by. And in our lives, we are not in a situation where someone was murdered or whatever, but all I'm saying is, in your life, you do have the situation where in the 1 yard, you've left behind a trail of death and destruction. Don't let that define you. I mean, you might say, well, it doesn't define me anyway. I don't care about that. But maybe you should. Maybe you should care about being defined by how you are an asset to the life on this planet. And the coronavirus is a test of that in terms of us to our fellow man. But I think it's also starting to ask us, are we consumers of this planet, or should we be custodians and conservers? So all of that talking, all of that has just come from this idea of what searching the internet for information on tickets to Bandimere Speedway. And what that's kind of symbolic of is this man who's searching for new life for himself. This man who's searching for real excitement. This man who wants to step outside of the sterile place that he feels that he's in. And that is, in a way, the same challenge that we face with as well, is how do we make our lives better? And for Watts on June 30th, it was trying to get a ticket to Bandimere Speedway. And that was the beginning of this long roller coaster ending in a nightmare for his family. And so in the same way, what are you searching for? And isn't it creating a nightmare for other things or other people? And I think the trick is to find your happiness and find your bliss in a way that doesn't subtract from someone else. It sort of adds to everyone. And I think that's not very easy to do. I think one of the few areas that does that is art, where by putting the art there, it enhances things for everybody. And unless you're an artist like Van Gogh, he does the art at his own expense. He suffers and is troubled while being an artist. It can enhance things for a lot of people. I'm just saying we must be mindful in how we live so that it's not always win-lose. We should try to live in a way that it is we are assets to one another on this planet, and also to the other creatures that we share it with. And I guess I'm thinking about this because I've got a little puppy, and I've got to not be selfish, and I've got to think, what will make him happy? And on the other hand, he can't be made happy all the time. And that is the negotiation I think we have just in general between ourselves and others, is how can we get the best average happiness between ourselves? A little bit of give and take. And I think that journey starts by getting rid of magical thinking. And for me, I had, I guess, a bit of magical thinking taking on this puppy, where I thought, well, it's going to be nice to have this little doggy around and take him for walks. What about the excrement? What about other things? What about anyway, I'm not going to go through all that, and it's important to have those experiences and then say, okay, Some of this isn't pleasant, but that's okay. It's testing my resilience. It's testing my commitment. It's testing my ability to give. It's testing my ability to love. I think that is ultimately the answer, is how do you go into the world causing minimum harm? Well, by loving the world. I'm talking about the being alive, by thinking of life as precious, all life. Our lives, the lives of others, and the lives of things that we don't necessarily need to care about. You know, I found a baby bird on the ground the other day, and I thought I should maybe catch it and take it home to look after it. But then, you know what they say, you should leave a baby bird where it is because its parents are nearby. But then I also knew there were cats nearby. And is it my problem? No, it's not necessarily my problem. But maybe we should make those sort of problems our problems, and that way we'll have a world worth living in, you know, where we care about what is around us. I really hope that is going to be the legacy of this coronavirus, is that we come out of it caring more about the little things, caring more about our freedoms, not taking things for granted, not being entitled, appreciating access to alcohol, appreciating access to one another, appreciating our health, appreciating the sunshine, appreciating being able to go for a drive somewhere or to hold hands with someone. I hope we're going to come out of this with a sense of appreciation for just the ordinary things in life, that even ordinary things are extraordinary. Instead of wanting amazing fairy tales and then creating nightmares for others as a result of that. Anyway, I apologize for waffling towards the end of this episode. I think it's the previous video I made on Van Gogh was just really compelling and intense. If you haven't watched any of the Van Gogh episodes, I want to invite you to listen to that one. It's really a powerful letter from the younger brother to the older brother while his son was fighting for his life. So maybe check that out. And you know, that is connecting us to the past, 230 years ago. This is 2 years ago. And there's just so much in the fabric and tapestry of life and time that we can connect to if we choose to do that. Life can be such a rich experience if we just connect ourselves to the experience of not just ourselves being alive, but others being alive as well. Anyway, on that note, thank you for listening. If you haven't subscribed, please do. If you've enjoyed this episode, gotten some value out of it, please share, let others know. Share on the networks that are interested in this sort of stuff, Chris Watts forums and such. And I will see you guys next time.